In the cramped living room, stacks of cardboard boxes loomed dismally like tombstones marking the demise of a marriage. Theodore Eugene Brennan, drained of energy, leaned his back against the radiator's icy surface. In his trembling hands were two symbols of his former life's end, the official court divorce decree and his mobile phone. The screen glowed 3:47 p.m. An hour ago, Judge Morrison's gavel had brought down the curtain on a 22-year story that Theodore had naively believed to be a love story. A sudden vibration from his phone yanked him back to reality. The display showed Veronica, his ex-wife's name. Against his better judgment, he opened the message. "I hope you enjoy your pathetic studio apartment. Roland just moved his grand piano into your former music room. The movers said it's worth more than you'll make in 5 years. Oh, and we're converting your studio into a cigar lounge for someone who truly matters in this world." Another vibration, and a photo appeared on the screen. Roland, triumphant, posed in Theodore's study, a Harvard diploma proudly displayed above him, having replaced his grandfather Eugene's military commendations. Roland's smug expression was more like a predator's sneer, assessing its prey. "You'll die in poverty and alone, just like your grandfather," the next message read. "At least he had his precious secrets to brighten his days in the nursing home. What do you have? A violin and illusions of talent?" Theodore, consumed by rage, raised his hand to smash the phone against the wall, but at that moment, it rang. Not a message, but an actual call. The number displayed as a sequence of zeros with a 1 at the end. After several unsuccessful attempts, Theodore, as if hypnotized, answered, "Theodore Eugene Brennan." A crisp male voice, with a military cadence, spoke on the line. Every word was delivered with the precision of a gunshot. "Brennan, this is Colonel James Whitmore from the Pentagon's Property Recovery Division. Please listen carefully to what I'm about to say. Your grandfather, Staff Sergeant Eugene Brennan, completed a top-secret military operation in Cambodia in 1964. My grandfather was a supply sergeant in Vietnam. He played piano in officers' clubs." Theodore automatically countered, repeating the story his father Douglas had told him hundreds of times. "That was merely a cover story. Mr. Brennan, your grandfather was a cryptographer in the 5th Special Forces Group. His mission was classified at the highest level for 60 years. The secrecy expired at midnight." Theodore slowly rose, his legs feeling weak. "What are you talking about?" "In the jungles of Cambodia, your grandfather discovered something whose value has significantly increased over the past 6 decades. Due to the mission's secrecy, he couldn't claim compensation. Now, with interest and inflation, that amount is approximately $156 million. The phone slipped from Theodore's hand and fell to the floor with a dull thud. He heard the distant voice of the colonel continuing to speak. With trembling hands, he brought the phone back to his ear. "That's impossible. My grandfather died in a state nursing home. My parents had to take out a second mortgage to pay for his care." Staff Sergeant Brennan made his choice. He chose silence to protect his family and his country, but he also stipulated certain conditions. The money can only be transferred to his direct descendant and only under specific terms. "What are those conditions?" "You must immediately come to Washington. A Delta flight departs from O'Hare in 3 hours. The ticket is in your name, first class, seat 14I by the window. Your grandfather specifically noted this in his file." "How did you know to call me today, right after the divorce?" A pause hung on the line. "Your grandfather's instructions were very specific, Mr. Brennan. We were to contact you the day you lost everything. His exact words were, 'When my grandson has nothing left to lose, give him everything I couldn't get.' Give him everything I couldn't get." The phrase echoed in the air like a prophecy from the past. But he passed away 35 years ago. How could he have known? A reasonable question arose. Eugene Brennan possessed a unique gift of foresight, Colonel Whitmore countered. His ability to analyze patterns was invaluable to military intelligence. Now you face a choice. Uncover the secrets he kept. Time is relentless. 72 hours to complete the mission your grandfather started. Otherwise, the entire inheritance will revert to the Department of Defense. Beyond the window, Lake Michigan stretched out, its leaden waves reminiscent of my grandfather's gaze, fixed on nothing, lost in a sea of memories he never shared. Veronica's message flashed in my mind, predicting my miserable existence in poverty and solitude. Roland's smug face, lording over my home, materialized before my eyes. "Colonel Whitmore, what exactly did my grandfather find in the jungle?" I asked, a tremor in my voice. "The answer to that question is valued at $156 million, Mr. Brennan," came the reply. "I'll expect you at the Pentagon tomorrow at 8:00 a.m. Don't forget to bring your grandfather's music diary. You still have it, don't you?" A box I had fiercely guarded from Veronica during the divorce flashed into my memory. On it, in my mother's neat handwriting, were the words, "Grandpa Eugene's things." "Yes, I have it," I confirmed. "Excellent. And one more thing, Mr. Brennan. Your ex-wife's new companion, Roland Ashford, is the grandson of William Ashford, a defense contractor from 1964. This is no mere coincidence. Nothing in your current situation is accidental. Your grandfather foresaw this many years ago." The call disconnected, leaving me in the empty apartment, surrounded by the shattered fragments of a collapsed marriage. In my hand, the phone had become a bridge to a past I never knew existed. Outside the window, the Chicago skyline merged with the darkening sky. Somewhere in that labyrinth of glass and steel, my ex-wife celebrated a new life in my former home with a man whose family might be connected to the secrets my grandfather took to his grave. I walked over to the box of my grandfather's belongings and pulled out his leather diary. The pages, yellowed with age, were filled with musical notations that I had played on my violin since childhood. Only now did I notice what I had never seen before on the margins of the first page, barely discernible pencil lines, "For Theodore, when all is lost." 3 months before that fateful call that turned my life upside down, I stood on the Symphony Center stage, my violin pouring out the final notes of Brahms's D major concerto. The hall erupted in applause, 2,000 audience members rising to their feet. But in the third row sat Veronica, her hands resting motionless in her lap. She wasn't applauding. That should have been the first warning sign. My life at 47 flowed rhythmically, like a metronome. Every morning, I woke at 6:00 a.m. in our Lake Forest home, practicing scales in my soundproof studio while Veronica performed her asanas on the terrace overlooking the pool. The house, sprawling across 2 acres of manicured land, was an embodiment of Veronica's design aesthetic and my financial solvency. We had bought it 15 years ago when the Chicago Symphony Orchestra promoted me to first chair. Back then, Veronica still attended my performances and genuinely admired how my fingers danced over the strings. "Your grandfather would be proud," my mother Patricia said at the housewarming, running her hand over the marble countertop. "Eugene always said music would open doors for you that he could never enter." Grandpa Eugene had passed away 12 years earlier, but his presence was felt in our family like a haunting melody. My father, Douglas, kept a photo of his father on the mantelpiece, a black and white snapshot of a young man in military uniform with a piercing gaze. Next to it lay Eugene's Bronze Star, though none of us knew for what merits he had received it. "He came back from Vietnam a different man," Douglas would recount after his third beer at family dinners. "He spent 6 months in Cambodia, even before his official deployment. He never spoke about it. He just played the piano, as if trying to drown out something only he could hear." A musician carries melodies audible only to their inner ear. Inheriting Eugene's musical gift, he chose a different path of self-expression. Where Eugene, a jazz improviser, made piano keys sparkle under his fingers in smoky clubs, he found himself in the rigorous world of classical music. In this universe, structure and precision reigned, where every note was predetermined and fixed. Veronica, whom he met at a charity gala 23 years ago, was captivated by this side of him. "You're not like all these other men," she whispered, her warm breath caressing his ear during a dance. "These hedge fund titans think money is music, but you create something eternal." At the time, she worked at a small design firm, full of ambition and a hunger for success. Her modest attire, a borrowed dress and artificial pearls, only added to her charm in his eyes. He was 32, she was 29, and in her gaze, he saw himself as Brahms. The first 10 years of their marriage were happy. Veronica transformed their homes, each becoming more exquisite as his career grew. After buying the Lake Forest house, she quit her job, declaring her desire to dedicate herself to creating a beautiful life for both of them. He, in turn, devoted 6 hours a day to rehearsals, performed 3 times a week in concerts, and conducted masterclasses at Northwestern University on weekends. They dreamed of children but constantly postponed the matter, finding new reasons, touring, renovations, or other urgent affairs. The changes began gradually, like a violin falling out of tune. Veronica joined the country club and started spending time with women whose husbands owned investment firms and tech startups. At home, she spoke of luxurious villas in Aspen, yachts on Lake Geneva, and private jets at Art Basel. "Can you believe it? Roland Ashford bought a Basque yacht," she once mused, without looking up from her phone, "and a painting for $23 million. Roland Ashford's name became a harbinger of impending change. He hired Veronica to design his Lincoln Park penthouse without consulting her husband. "It's just one project," she declared. "His money is no different from anyone else's." But that wasn't true. Roland's money came wrapped in attention, compliments, and comparisons that gradually eroded his self-confidence. Roland, a tall man at 6'2", a Harvard Business School graduate, contrasted sharply with his modest 5'9" and Juilliard diploma. His annual income of $40 million seemed enormous compared to his $300,000. "Your husband is quite successful," Roland once remarked at a dinner party, his hand lingering on Veronica's shoulder a moment longer than it should have. "It must be fascinating to live with an artist." In his mouth, the word artist sounded like a harmless hobby, pleasant but of little consequence. Veronica laughed, a sound he hadn't heard in months, bright and genuine, and it made his heart sink. It happened 6 months ago. A spring tour to Vienna should have been a triumph, 3 weeks of performances with the Vienna Philharmonic. Instead, it became the final chord in their marriage. While he played Mozart in the concert hall, Veronica was entertaining herself in Roland's penthouse. His nephew, James, caught them in an embrace, shattering all his notions of love, loyalty, and the woman who had once said his music was all the wealth she would ever need. The FaceTime call from James came at 2 a.m. Vienna time, as he reviewed scores in his room at the Hotel Imperial. His nephew's face, pale and troubled, filled the phone screen. He looked younger than his 23 years. "Uncle Theo, I have to tell you something." His voice trembled as if he were 13 again, calling him after his father's funeral. "Tonight, I saw Aunt Veronica at Mr. Ashford's office building. She's redoing his office space too," he said, putting down his violin. "She mentioned something about expanding the project." The conversation touched on the delicate matter of expanding the boundaries of what was permissible within a single project. Midnight enveloped the city, and only the penthouse shone with light. Theodore recalled James catching Veronica and Roland on the balcony. "They were there, Uncle Theo. I can't find the words to describe what I saw. They definitely weren't discussing fabric swatches," he confessed. The bow slipped from Theodore's hands, clattering against the music stand. "What exactly did you see?" he asked. "They were kissing, and it wasn't just a friendly kiss. Her dress, it was unbuttoned. I took pictures so you'd believe me," James replied. The photos confirmed Theodore's worst fears. Veronica, pressed against the glass railing, lost in Roland's embrace. His hands tangled in her hair, her red dress half unbuttoned. In the background, the Chicago night sparkled, as if celebrating his humiliation. The timestamp on the photos, 11:47 coincided with Veronica's message that she was going to bed due to a headache. Coincided. Theodore performed the concert flawlessly, his fingers automatically finding the right notes, while his mind was consumed by treacherous images. Austrian critics noted the technical perfection, but lamented the lack of emotion, which perfectly reflected the state of a man whose life had turned out to be a lie. 3 days after returning to Chicago, Theodore decided to speak with Veronica. She was humming Vivaldi's Spring in the kitchen, diamond earrings sparkling in her ears, which he had never seen before. "Beautiful earrings," he said, deliberately calmly, setting down his violin case. She instinctively touched the jewelry. "Thanks. It's a bonus from the Ashford project." "It must be a very important project if they pay with jewelry earned at midnight," Theodore retorted. Her expression changed like parts of a symphony: surprise, calculation, defiance, and finally, cold resolve. "James saw us. He works in Roland's building, remember?" "Or did you forget about family while undressing for a client?" Theodore asked. Veronica set her cup down with a firm hand. I'm not going to deny it. How generous of you. Do you want me to apologize? Fine. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but I don't regret what happened, she replied. Veronica stood and smoothed her skirt with her well-manicured hands, which had once caressed Theodore's face after concerts. Do you know what it's like to be married to a man who loves dead composers more than living people? You spend 6 hours a day with your violin, Theodore. Roland spends that time building empires. I'm a musician. It's my life. You always said you loved that about me, he argued. I was 29, and I thought passion for art meant passion for life. But you don't live, Theodore. You just perform. Even our marriage became a concert with the same movements, repeating endlessly. Roland opens new worlds for me. Last week we flew to Monaco for lunch. For lunch? When was the last time we went somewhere that wasn't related to your work? Theodore asked. Are you willing to throw away 22 years for lunch in Monaco? He wondered. No, I threw them away for a man who makes me feel alive. Want to know the difference between you and Roland? When he walks into a room, people notice. When you walk in, they might appreciate your talent, but no one fears you. No one needs you. No one's life changes because Theodore Brennan exists, Veronica declared. Except yours. My money changed your life quite a bit, Theodore countered. Veronica laughed bitterly. Your money? Roland earns your annual salary in a week. That house you're so proud of, his wine cellar costs more. You're a museum piece, a relic playing for other relics. The world has moved on, and you're still on stage, playing music of people who died centuries ago. The divorce lawyer turned out to be Veronica's father's golf partner. Naturally, Illinois law favored the non-working spouse, especially one who had sacrificed a career for the marriage. The papers were filed before Theodore could even comprehend what was happening. Veronica demanded the house, half the retirement accounts, alimony that would drain him, and the maintenance of her accustomed lifestyle. You'll keep your violin and one car, her lawyer generously stated. Mrs. Brennan is quite reasonable. She believed he didn't even deserve an old car. Mrs. Brennan had shown remarkable discretion. His mother, Patricia, couldn't hold back tears upon hearing the news. That woman never truly appreciated you, she lamented. His father, Douglas, reacted more calmly. Eugene went through a lot of loss too, you know, he remarked. He came back from the war and found out his first wife had sold the family farm and run off with another man. He had to start everything from scratch, and in the end, he passed away with nothing. He passed away with honor, I corrected him, reminding my father of the importance of moral principles. Sometimes that's all a man has left. The grand Pentagon building loomed over the Virginia landscape, a monumental geometric giant, its limestone walls reflecting the first rays of the rising sun. After an overnight flight from Chicago, I carefully carried my grandfather's diary in my backpack, wrapped in a soft towel, a relic too precious to entrust to checked luggage. The Uber driver, a veteran himself, whistled in surprise when he learned my destination. Pentagon at dawn, he drawled. Are you connected to the military? My grandfather served as a staff sergeant. His name was Eugene Brennan. You must have very important business being called to the Pentagon. If only he knew what secrets lay behind this visit. I had spent the entire flight immersed in Eugene's notes, trying to discern patterns that had eluded me before. The musical excerpts were not random sketches. Each piece was dated, and these dates coincided with key military operations in Southeast Asia. But the real secrets were hidden in the margins, tiny markings resembling dynamic notations, but not conforming to conventional musical notation. Colonel James Whitmore met me at the checkpoint. His uniform was impeccably pressed. He looked younger than I had imagined from his voice, perhaps around 50, with a military bearing that involuntarily made me straighten my back. Mr. Brennan, thank you for coming, he said, shaking my hand firmly but briefly. Before we proceed, I need to verify your identity beyond the documents you've presented. Tell me about your grandfather's piano. It was a 1947 Baldwin Spinet, finished in mahogany. He bought it at a pawn shop in Raleigh right after the war. The C note on the first octave had a cigarette burn from the previous owner. What did he call his Sunday performances at the Veterans Home? I couldn't help but smile. Church for those who don't go to church. He said music was the only religion that never lied. Whitmore nodded approvingly. Follow me. We descended 3 floors underground, passing through checkpoints where security measures grew increasingly stringent. Finally, we arrived in a room resembling a bank vault, windowless, lit only by the cold glow of fluorescent lamps. In the center stood a metal table piled with boxes of documents. "This is your grandfather's personal file," Whitmore announced, opening the first box. "The information you are about to receive has long been classified top secret. Even now, some details will remain undisclosed." In the photographs, Eugene appeared young, with a piercing gaze, dressed in camouflage. He stood surrounded by soldiers whose faces were intentionally blurred. In the background, the wreckage of a small plane was visible. Operation Night Music, February 1964. Your grandfather's unit was sent to Cambodia to investigate the crash of a Soviet reconnaissance plane. Officially, there were no Soviet troops in Cambodia. Officially, neither were we. "What did they find?" I asked impatiently. "The plane carried an advanced computer system, a prototype for encoding nuclear launch sequences, but that wasn't the main prize. The pilot, Victor Klov, survived the crash. He was severely wounded but conscious. Your grandfather spoke enough Russian to communicate with him." Whitmore produced a transcript of the interrogation, heavily redacted but still legible. "Klov understood he was dying. He gave your grandfather information about Swiss bank accounts used to finance double agents. Account numbers, passwords, all the details. But the most interesting part was yet to come." He showed me another photograph. In it, Eugene held a metal briefcase. "Your grandfather memorized all the data before handing the briefcase to command. He knew those account numbers. He could have claimed those funds at any time, $22 million in 1964. Can you imagine what that fortune is worth today?" Whitmore, as if anticipating the question about the cost of silence, explained why the protagonist's grandfather hadn't claimed the due compensation. Disclosing information about the money would inevitably have led to the exposure of the entire operation, which would have cost human lives. Therefore, Eugene chose to remain silent, encoding the mission details in his music. The Pentagon, nevertheless, remained indebted to him, but Eugene consciously refused the payments, fearing it would draw undue attention to his family. Now that the secrecy period had expired, the compensation amount, including 60 years of interest and the Department of Defense's guilt multipliers, had reached a substantial $156 million, but with one condition set by his grandfather. Whitmore handed the protagonist a sealed envelope, addressed to him in Eugene's shaky handwriting. The instructions stated that the letter could only be opened by the grandson when he has lost everything material and can acquire everything essential. Inside the envelope, 3 pages written in familiar handwriting were discovered. Eugene had written, foreseeing the collapse of his grandson's marriage and the loss of his assets, knowing his romantic nature inherited from his father. He explained that the music he left behind contained not only notes, but also coordinates, and each change in rhythm marked a numerical sequence. In Storage Unit 447 in Baltimore, paid until 2087, was something he couldn't destroy and couldn't claim. The Pentagon's money, rightfully belonging to his grandson, paled in comparison to what awaited him in Baltimore. To claim it meant choosing between truth and comfort. The Swiss accounts, though cleared by time, held dirty secrets. They were linked to influential families who had amassed fortunes from war profits. One name, as Eugene foresaw, would become particularly significant to his grandson. He had 72 hours from Whitmore's call to make a choice: claim the truth or leave it buried. Music, like truth, resonates through time. The storage facility in Baltimore, with its dilapidated brick facade, looked abandoned. However, the keypad at the entrance worked perfectly when the protagonist entered the code hidden in the third part of Eugene's Autumn Fugue, 1964-0228, the mission date combined with his service number. Compartment 447, located at the end of a long corridor smelling of rust and old paper, opened smoothly. Inside stood an unremarkable army green metal cabinet. Chess pieces were arranged on it in a mid-game position, the Budapest Gambit, an opening Eugene had taught him as a child, explaining that a gambit is a sacrifice, a loss of material to gain a position. In the top drawer of the cabinet, he found a key to a safe deposit box at Baltimore First National and a leather briefcase filled with documents that made his hands tremble. Photocopies of Swiss bank statements, dated 1964 to 1970, showed deposits from American defense contractors to Soviet intelligence agents. The sums were enormous, but the names were even more horrifying. Ashford Industries appeared 17 times. William Ashford, Roland's grandfather, sold defective helicopter parts to the Army while simultaneously funding Soviet operations in Cambodia. American soldiers died in crashes caused by mechanical failures that Ashford knew about and ignored. Profits from these defective parts amounted to 43%, and the blood money in the Swiss accounts totaled $22 million. Suddenly, the phone rang. An unknown number. "Mr. Brennan," a familiar voice said, belonging to Roland Ashford. "I understand you were in Washington." "How do you know that?" the protagonist replied. "How I foresaw your wife's vulnerability to a more generous offer. How my family has long known the story of Eugene Brennan and his findings in the jungle. For 6 decades we've watched your family, waiting for the moment when someone would claim what was illegally taken," came the reply. "Your grandfather was a war profiteer, enriching himself on the deaths of American soldiers," Brennan indignantly declared. "My grandfather was a shrewd businessman who saw war as just another market," the caller countered. "Your grandfather is a thief who stole evidence belonging to the government. He merely recorded the truth that those in power tried to hide. Truth is what they decide. Brennan, here's my offer. Take the Pentagon money and disappear from Baltimore. Leave the documents, and you'll have enough wealth to forget Veronica and me. Otherwise, you'll learn what real loss is." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm offering the same choice as your grandfather, silence and security, or truth and its consequences. He chose silence. Be wiser." The connection broke. Brennan stood in the warehouse, holding evidence of crimes that had built one of America's largest empires, and made a decision. He called Dennis, his cousin, an investigative journalist. "Dennis, clear your schedule. I have a story that will be your big break." The Baltimore First National Bank safe opened slowly. The safe deposit box was larger than expected and contained the original documents from the warehouse, as well as something new, cassettes labeled Kozlov's Confession, and a second set of ledgers, tracking the Swiss money after 1970. The accounts were inherited by Roland's father, and then by Roland himself in 2010. But Eugene had left another surprise, a sheet of music titled Suite of Redemption. Humming the melody, Brennan realized it was a musical cipher for the account passwords. His grandfather had not just documented the crimes, he had preserved access to the money. The next 24 hours, Brennan spent with Dennis and a team of forensic accountants brought in by his newspaper. Swiss banks confirmed the account's reality and activity with a total balance of $87 million. "Technically, it's clean money, but built on bones," Dennis said. "Publication will destroy Ashford Industries and Veronica, who linked her future to him." "Doubts?" Brennan asked. He remembered how Eugene had chosen silence for his family, and then the names of the dead in the casualty lists, young men who died because William Ashford chose profit over lives. "No doubts. But we'll be smart. First, we'll publish the historical documents so the public can draw parallels to the present. The Swiss money won't go to me, but to a fund for the families of soldiers killed in helicopter crashes between 1964 and 1970. Every cent. The Pentagon compensation is enough for me. The blood money will return to the families from whom it was stolen." Dennis smiled. "Your grandfather would be proud." "Perhaps. Or he'd think I'm a fool for choosing truth over security." "What do you think he'd say?" Brennan looked at the notes, Eugene's meticulous markings, his patient recording of horrors he couldn't prevent but refused to forget. "I think he'd say the music was worth playing, even if the audience wasn't ready to hear it." The Washington Post published Dennis's article on Tuesday morning under the headline, "Blood Money, How Defense Contractor Fraud Funded Enemy Operations in Vietnam." By noon, Ashford Industries shares had plummeted by 40%. By market close, Roland Ashford faced a federal investigation for inherited fraud and tax evasion on undeclared Swiss accounts. News reports flashed about tax evasion from undeclared Swiss bank accounts. Theodore watched the unfolding events from his new office, a renovated townhouse in the prestigious Lincoln Park neighborhood. It was here that he founded the Eugene Brennan Foundation, dedicated to supporting veteran families. The recently acquired funds from the Pentagon, a substantial sum of $156 million, were absolutely legal and entirely at Theodore's disposal. However, his thoughts constantly returned to the tragic reports of helicopter crashes, to the faces of the fallen 19-year-old soldiers whose lives had been sacrificed for someone's profit. That day, Veronica called 17 times. On the 18th call, Theodore answered. "Theo, Roland was arrested. The FBI confiscated everything, the house, accounts, even my car, claiming it was acquired with criminal proceeds. I'm left with nothing." Theodore replied, "You have what you chose." Veronica pleaded, "Please, I realized my mistake. Roland used me just like his grandfather exploited those soldiers. I'm living at my sister's place in Nerville in her basement. Me? In a basement in Nerville? Veronica, what do you want from me? I want to come home. That place isn't my home anymore. The bank took it after Roland's assets were frozen when you couldn't make payments. I bought it at auction last month." "You bought our house?" "I bought the house. My Uncle Bernard and Aunt Dolores live there now. They lost their home due to exorbitant medical bills, and now they have a beautiful place to spend their years. It's certainly a better use than Roland's cigar room." Veronica's sobs became hysterical, but they no longer touched Theodore's heart. "What do I do now?" "The same thing I did. Start fresh. The difference is, you chose your path, and mine was predetermined." 6 months later, Theodore appeared again at the Symphony Center to present his composition, Suite of Redemption, to the public. This piece was written by Eugene, but had never been performed before. The audience was unaware that the melody contained the encoded passwords to the Swiss bank accounts. Tragedy embodied in art. Theodore's mother, Patricia, sat in the front row, and tears streamed down her cheeks during the Adagio movement, in which the names of all the soldiers killed in the helicopter crashes supplied by Ashford's company were encrypted. The charitable foundation Theodore established had already paid $12 million to the families of the fallen soldiers. Dennis was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for his investigative journalism. Ashford Industries declared bankruptcy after the legal proceedings began. Roland was sentenced to 7 years in prison for tax evasion, the only charge that could be proven regarding his crimes. 2 years later, Veronica married her divorce lawyer, a practical decision that probably suited her better than a marriage based on love. One day, Theodore's sister Monica asked him if he regretted anything that had happened. Specifically what? Exposing Roland or losing Veronica? Everything. You could have left it all as it was and stayed silent. Eugene did. Eugene didn't have a choice. The world wasn't ready to hear the truth. In 1964, he kept those secrets like seeds, waiting for the right moment to plant them. I, however, became the gardener who inherited his soil. The true legacy wasn't the money, though that certainly changed everything in a practical sense. It was the understanding that Eugene's silence wasn't weakness, but a carefully thought-out strategy. He played a long game, arranging the pieces so that 60 years later, his grandson could make the moves he couldn't. Theodore continued to live a modest life, residing in a small apartment near Symphony Hall. He still dedicated 6 hours a day to practice, and on weekends he gave free music lessons to veterans' children. His foundation expanded to include music therapy programs in veterans' hospitals, utilizing Eugene's compositions to help soldiers cope with the psychological traumas that Eugene himself had experienced but could not openly discuss. Sometimes Theodore performed in nursing homes, just as Eugene had, and he always concluded his concerts with Moonlight Serenade in his special arrangement. Most listeners didn't notice the Morse code encrypted within the melody, but occasionally, an old veteran would suddenly lift his head, recognizing the familiar pattern. The veteran suddenly looked up, his gaze unmistakably recognizing the familiar pattern. "Night music," one of them whispered, as if sharing a sacred secret. "You know about night music." "My grandfather knew it," I replied, "and he made sure its memory lived on." The true value of an inheritance lies not in monetary sums. It resides in the stories we carefully preserve, in the decisions we make when managing the gift we receive, and in the courage to perform difficult melodies, even when our hands tremble. Eugene left me something more than millions. He passed on compelling proof that justice, though slow, can prevail even after 6 decades. It arrives, encoded in the very rhythm of time, patiently waiting for someone, finally, to extract the right notes in the correct sequence and at the opportune moment. And that moment, as it turned out, was worth all the losses endured on the path to it.